Today is the second day of the second month of the 22nd year, or the 22nd day of the 22nd. Thank you, I'm present, thank you.
Mr. Lennox?
Here.
Mr. Brown?
Here.
Mr. Harkins?
Here.
Mrs. Becker?
Here, and I'd also like to ask for everyone's prayers and thoughts for those in Ukraine and with the situation there. Certainly are thinking and praying.
Mayor McCann?
Here.
And Mr. Ames will not be here today.
Okay, Christian, she's still walking around, Mick? Curtis, good morning.
How y'all?
Are we in compliance with the Freedom of Information Act?
Yes, sir, we are.
I need an approval of the agenda.
Move approval of the agenda.
Second.
All in favor, raise their right hand. Thank you very much. Workshop discussion. Mark, you want to lead on this?
Yes, sir. I'll just dive right in.
Mr.
Yeah.
Frank Rodriguez and Eric Greenway are late. We will just take a pause when they get here and put them right in.
Okay, good. All right, well, good morning, Mayor, Council. Today, 2/2/22, it's also my one-year anniversary. So, one-year anniversary here. No. Not because of that, but I'm just excited to be here and ironically to present a housing workshop. I could not have put this information together without these two across the room here. Sean, Jamie, thank you. They have a lot of knowledge from over the years here as a town staff as we think about and talk about and try to implement some housing initiatives. So with that being said, we're here today to talk about a few things. One, for me, this has been a good exercise simply for me to look back and see what the town has done to date. And so I'll remind us a little bit about that today. As a town council, as an elected body, you have established three very important public policies related to housing, and they come out of the strategic plan for housing, the R plan, and the town strategic plan. And so those are real strong public policy documents where I get my direction and information on what to do and how to move forward. A little bit about Hilton Head Island. We took a good look at it. I've learned a couple things. It's been a good exercise. We have some workforce and affordable housing options on Hilton Head. That question has come up to me a few times. I've asked that question myself, and so today I'll pause and just highlight what those neighborhoods are. You've also adopted some stronger policy or I would say some tactics beyond the strategies in those three documents above. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about what those are today. And then really why we're here. It's for a proposal. It's what are the significant next steps as we can affect housing, affordable workforce, low to moderate, AMI. You're going to hear a lot of different terms over time. For today, I'm just calling it housing. But the proposal to utilize and follow through on the use of the American Rescue Plan funds, as well as to talk about some ideas and a proposal to establish a public-private partnership to advance some housing choices on Hilton Head Island. So with that being said, the timeline. So looking back a little bit, in 2019, the town council adopted the Workforce Housing Strategic Plan. Soon after, the town council adopted the commercial conversion, which is a conversion of commercial square footage to residential units. In 2020, we adopted our plan. In 21, we adopted a density bonus with a workforce housing incentive. In 21, as we remember, we programmed the $5.2 million of American Rescue Plan funds. You, around the same time, through SoLoco and our partners in the region, as well as Beaufort County, asked staff to be a part of assessing a regional housing trust fund. And then, of course, just recently, I believe December, adopted the town strategic plan. All of those elements had strong housing components to them. And then we're here today, 2/2/22, a proposal to advance more housing initiatives. And so the Workforce Housing Strategic Plan had 8 recommendations. I won't go through them all, but recommendations were to establish a housing trust fund, a commercial reuse policy, make town-owned land available, density bonus program, employer-assisted, tax and impact fee rebates, and you can see them all. And you asked staff at the time to take a look at the housing trust fund, the commercial reuse policy, the town-owned lands, and the density bonus program. We have not started to dive into employer-assisted housing and the 6, 7, and 8 numbers and items on that page. Straight out of the workforce housing strategic plan, that they should have solutions for housing, should be designed to respect our natural and cultural resources. I put this up here on purpose so that we know what we're trying to accomplish is straight out of a strategic plan that you adopted. We're not making it up. It's pretty sound. It's pretty straightforward. Policies that not only provide housing for workers, but promote the community on the island. So we're not just trying to find a housing unit in the middle of nowhere. We're trying to add value to our community, add value to a neighborhood. That there should be a range of housing options on the island. Requires partnerships, public, private, and nonprofit. A little bit more on that later. And then incentives for housing should be applied in an equal manner so all property owners can realize the economic value. So right out of our plan, there are several core values in our plan that support housing, and you can read them on the board, from economy strategies and economy tactics all the way down to infrastructure strategy. And of course, we remember out of the town's strategic action plan, implement the American Rescue Plan, assess creation of a regional housing trust fund, and implement workforce and affordable housing strategies. So straight out of the documents. So a little bit about Hilton Head Island. Trying to understand currently what our island is in from a profile standpoint. So if we look at this very interesting chart, let's see if this works. No, I don't think I work. You see top left, population in 1970, 2,500. Population today, based upon the census, 37.6, and we've been really flat over the last decade. We've changed a lot here, we know that, right? So the folks that vote perhaps have been converted to folks that don't live here year-round. They might operate a business here, they might be on vacation here, but our island is very busy for showing 38,115 in 2030. I think that on a daily, we have more people residing here today. But these are the numbers we're dealt, and so when we really look at our population, it's 37,600 people as a census count. When we start looking at incomes, we took a look at, and this comes out of some of our mid-island study, as well as that island baseline capacity that we kicked off a few weeks ago. You can see that median household incomes, north end of the island, 86, south end, 93, Beaufort County, 78, and the Savannah, Hilton Head region overall is down and around 70. We get that from ESRI, which is the global powerhouse oversight of all geographic information system. So that data isn't just pulled together by us. But one thing that Sean and I have been talking about a little bit is for an example, take a look at Hilton Head Island, north and south. So 86 to 93, let's just say that a median household income, approximately 2.2, 2.3 people per household. Let's just use the $90,000 median household income value. When you start comparing it with household size, and so we have 4 quick tables here, and I'll explain them. The first one is 80% AMI, the second is 100, the third on the next sheet is 120, and the fourth is 150. But as we look at a household size around the 2 to 3 to 4 range, you'll see that at 80%, you're at 62,000 with a family of 4. At 80%, you're at 76,000 for a family of 4. At 100, you're at 91 for 120, and you're at 114. And so what this really helps us with is understanding not just gross income, because we talk a lot about gross income, AMI, low to moderate, a lot of those words are thrown out a lot. what we really have to look at is what can we rent it for? What can you afford as rent, and what can you afford as mortgage? And those other two columns up there, rent at 30% includes utilities. So let's say a family of three at 80% AMI, which is a $55,800 household income gross, can afford rent at $13.95. And that would maybe be a 1, 2, or 3 bedroom unit. And a $170,000 mortgage, and that's 5% interest, no down payment. And so we just kind of conservatively looked at those numbers. And so there's no real answer in these sheets today in this, but it's really good information as a baseline as we start trying to understand the goal. What is the goal? Are we trying to build for who? Are we trying to rent for what? Are we trying to sell at what price? And so this should definitely be that anchor of information that we have to keep at the forefront of our mind as we think about housing choice. So Sean did some research on Zillow. Thank you, Sean. Zillow Home Value Index for zip code 29926, 29928. You see that, you see the median value up there, or the typical home value, I should say. $619,000 in one area of our island and $689 in another. But what really jumps out at me really isn't only that number, it's what values have done over the last year in the Zillow prediction. I don't base everything on Zillow, we know that. We can, there's a lot more information to gain, but we're using this to get out of the gate. So instead of just using ESRI, the census, Zillow, we've done an assessment of Hilton Head Island permits over the last year. So we approved 219 permits, new residential permits. And so for argument's sake, we're just looking at single family right now. And behind the gates, really in the PUDs, 75% of those homes were built. I've got a little number here. The range anywhere between $185,000, which is great, all the way up to 2.9, and a median permit value, no land, $540,000. So some within the range of those, right? Some within this range, but most, if not the supermajority, completely far outside of that. And again, it's just data. Commuting trends, U.S. Census and Kimley Horn and some traffic assessments tell us that 13,000 and 13,500 folks come to the island every day, and close to 5,000 leave. There's about 8,000 residents that live and work on the island, and that 58.6% of those work here, not just live here, and then the rest, and you can see 4% go to Bluffton and beyond, some all the way to North Charleston. But a lot of employed residents living and working on the island, when we have that benefit to live and work here, we're always about 10 minutes away from home. It's just the other part of it getting to our island. And I think those are some good data points. What do we do with it? I don't know yet. So where are there options for workforce and affordable living options on our island? Well, we know that in 2011, the town donated over 14 acres to Hilton Head Habitat for Humanity. You can't get any better than the timing. The timing of that is perfect. And it's called The Glen. It's a beautiful, wonderful little community, a little neighborhood. Phase 1's complete. It was 16 units. Phase 2's underway. 10, probably 11 units completed today. But that's it. It's really reaching build out, and there's a lot of great success stories to talk about with those 14 acres and 32 families that live in the neighborhood. There's several others. We won't have to dive into a lot of them. Some have been here a while. Some haven't even had their CO yet. But 90 Dillon, Cedar Wells, Silby Tubbs, Sandalwood Terrace, Hilton Head Gardens, and I put on here 55 Gardner, right? So I really want to make the point. This isn't all about government subsidized housing is what we've researched. We've just researched something that's not market rate. So what are the options that are just not market rate on our island, and how did how did the town or the state or someone else, even a nonprofit, affect those units? And so Palmetto Bay Lodges is Sea Pine's company building worker housing, which is fabulous. 16 units right now, but much more room to grow. 55 Gardner, 13 units at 120% of the AMI. Excuse me, and then you can see some of these other units there. I brought back a little more information than we had when we were at council last time, and because this project, Hilton Head Gardens, is figuring itself out a little bit. You recently simply supported the tax-exempt multifamily bond. You just simply said, yes, it's good for the island. And this is really what they're doing. Vitus Development, and this was a few months ago at council. Vitus Development purchased Hilton Head Gardens for a little more than $14 million. Beaufort Housing Authority assisted with financing by issuing the bonds. The new owner intends to rehabilitate 112-unit property at about $50K per unit. And so just from $50K, you can kind of start imagining, the impacts will probably be good, but not overly significant, right? But they say they're going to improve site accessibility, repair the sidewalks and steps, right? Those ADA elements, jet the sewer lines, quality of life, and then some exterior and interior upgrades. And you can see, right? Paint, siding, shingles, gutters, appliances, hard wiring for fire smoke. So some life safety as well as some functionality improvements.
Mark, at what point do you want questions from the council?
Anytime?
Any questions on the first 20 pages, Mark? Alex?
I'll hold until Mark finishes. I'm taking some notes. I'm good.
Any questions at this point? Okay.
Just by comparison, Mark, you put up the average or median incomes. What does a first-year teacher make, and what is a entry-level fire rescue?
First-year teachers, $37K. The school district's here to give me a better, 37. And fire rescue, approximately 45. Thank you for that question. Ironically, I looked those up to just try to draw some comparisons, because we talk a lot about we have to try to be a part of solving the workforce housing issue. But I always go back to what are we really trying to accomplish? Is it for a teacher? If so, there's the number. If it's for a fireman, there we go, there's the number. So good data to have, good data so far. All right, so what, as a town council, what have you directed us as a staff to do over time? And really, what's current? So currently, we have a commercial conversion and density bonus incentive. We have an assessment along with Eric Greenway, with the Regional Housing Trust Fund, as an assessment of a Regional Housing Trust Fund. We also have entertained how to program the American Rescue Plan funds that were provided to us as a COVID stimulus bill through the federal government, passed directly to the town. And then you also told me recently, go assess the town-owned property map, the town-owned asset bank, and let us know what's completely off the table, and are there some properties that make sense in the right location that could be used for? And the for could be economic development. It could be for housing as well. So we've started to do that, and I'll share with you our research to date. So workforce housing incentives, again, just another plug. We talk about it as much as we can. There is a commercial conversion of existing non-residential square footage to residential units. The density bonus, we have additional density allowed provided in exchange for workforce housing units. Keep in mind that density bonus is only allowed in particular zoning districts, not everywhere across the board, but in some. We have prepared, yes, sir.
Can I ask a question, please? You raised the commercial conversion and the density bonus. It's my understanding that we've had zero interest from the development community for commercial conversion. We've had zero interest from the developer community for density bonus. So it's time for us to be looking to other tools.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Can I follow up on Glenn's point there? I agree wholeheartedly with that. But I'd also like us to revisit those two options, okay? See if those tools can maybe be sharpened a bit, okay? Bonus density, for an example, there's a 3-acre stipulation on that bonus density. Maybe we need to reduce that to attract not necessarily the home run hitters as far as developers are concerned, but maybe the smaller developers.
Thank you.
And may I just point out too that with regard to density bonus, we have had developers who have come to town and offered up projects that they're considering and offering percentage towards workforce housing. So it hasn't been zero. There are some that have come forward, and I just want to make sure that we're staying aware of all of, they may not have been the appropriate places or properties or whatever, but the fact is, people all have come forward.
Thank you, ma'am. It was several months ago that I was with you, and it was probably 1 or 2 workshops that we had early in my time to talk workforce housing. And I believe it was Mr. Lennox that said, listen, we adopted a couple policies. What has staff done to market? What have you done to advertise? What have you done to communicate? I believe it was Mr. Lennox. I could be wrong. But what we've done, and I think it's done well, workforce housing incentives in Hilton Head Island, left side of the screen. We have an application form. It looks easy on the application form, although there's a lot of people in the crowd here that'll tell me it's not. We emailed the information packets to commercial realtors. We posted it on the town's website. We posted it on LinkedIn and other social media outlets, and called and emailed the good old-fashioned way. And formally, I think I do see some commercial to residential conversions, but formally, according to staff that takes a look at the permits based upon the time that you adopted the policy, that we haven't had any real results yet. So loud and clear. So you've also asked to assess the regional, you asked to assess in the okay. You asked to assess in the housing strategic plan a housing trust fund. As we got through the Southern Lowcountry Board and the group that meets with Beaufort County, we started to take a look at not just a housing trust fund, but a regional housing trust fund. And so a little reminder for us all, in September of 19, you approved entering into an MOA with the county to participate in a cost-sharing contract for consulting to develop a regional housing trust fund. And at the time, as I look back at that, it was really about, yeah, let's spend a little money, let's spend some dollars to understand this a lot better. And council approved up to $25K. And in December of 2020, Beaufort County had a contract for a regional housing trust fund proposal and implementation plan. Our portion was $24,193 of the $120,000, almost $121 spent to date. October, Mr. Greenway, who's here, hello, sir, presented a final plan to town council. The regional housing trust fund proposal and implementation plan, we won't dive into it today, but it talks about revenue sources, how can we fund it, the use of funds, the fund governance and partnership, and project criteria. A little update since we last talked about it. The county proposes to use Community Works to administer the trust fund. Is that still accurate, sir? Good. The county will present the town with documents to request participation in the trust fund and to hire Community Works and allocate the funds. Council, soon you can consider those options and decide whether a regional housing trust fund is for you, for us, for the community or not. And the trust fund really is to fill gaps, right? So it's not a development corporation per se. It's a fund that fills the gaps of financing and a strategy for land acquisition and development. The county's proposing a potential distribution of their American Rescue plan funds, 250K up to 500 with a couple conditions, allowing the funds to be used towards the trust fund initially. And you will see this in the coming months. What's important is what's here in front of us, the regional versus local housing. Yes, sir.
I'd like to take a break a second now and
Okay.
bring up Dr. Rodriguez and Eric.
Yes, sir.
Because it fits right into what you're talking about here.
Sir.
Dr. Rodriguez, I seen you in the back there, sir. Please join us. Where do you want him to go?
Where? Yeah. Hey.
Good to see you. Hey, Josh.
And you should be live. Thank you.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Dr. Rodriguez, it's always a pleasure to see you, sir.
Pleasure to see you. Thank you.
Go ahead, sir.
Well, I have a few members of my team here from Beaufort County School District. I have our Chief Financial Officer, Tanya Crosby, and I have Carol Crutchfield from our operations team. And I think the first thing I would do is just share a couple highlights with you, and then I'll ask them to come up and share a little more in depth with you. I think you all received a little information on the school impact fee, a flyer that we had put together with some information. So prior to my arrival, I know that the county had been exploring impact fees, and then the school district went along into conversations with the county on impact fees and approved to move forward with the impact fees. There had been a project review list that they had identified as needs. I think one of the critical components around impact fees for the school district is that we really don't have any way of raising dollars for capital maintenance or capital projects, capital dollars that we can use other than referendums. 8% for capital projects, and then, of course, impact fee component. So the school board decided to move forward with the impact fees. The study was done by Tischler Bice, and in that study, they identified the southern area of the county, and for us, our service area is all of southern Beaufort County, south of, the southern portion in Bluffton, Okeechobee, Hilton Head, Hardeeville. However, in the northern Beaufort County, because of the space and capacity availability in northern Beaufort County, it was determined in that study not to apply impact fees to northern Beaufort County. So the growth area for us is, in terms of our service area, is southern Beaufort County. And for us, all of it is one service area. We don't look at it by municipality. For us, it's a whole service area. With that in mind, I'll ask Ms. Crosby to come forward.
Good morning. I underestimated the length of time it would take to get to from the northernmost Beaufort County, almost in Yemassee, to here. So I left 2 hours ahead of time, but it wasn't quite enough. So I apologize for allowing us to be a little flexible this morning. As Dr. Rodriguez mentioned, we have a couple of options for capital improvements, and those are voter-approved referendum and our 8% projects, and those affect taxpayers throughout the entire county. Impact fees are another opportunity for the school district to allow additional revenues and offset a little of that needed, necessary capital improvements in order to lower the burden on all of the taxpayers in the county. It can't be used for normal operations or maintenance. Those are for our general fund operations, or 8%. But it is a one-time payment for growth-related infrastructure. usually collected at the time the building permits are issued. The money has to be spent within 3 years of a scheduled date of construction, and we have to produce an annual monitoring report. And the study, I think what was very important for the town of Bluffton was that the study must be updated every 5 years. So there is an opportunity for us to see if the need is still present and if the fee amount needs to be changed or in any way. And that, again, must be voted on by the bodies at that time. It requires an analysis of affordable housing, which has been done in the initial study and would be required on each update as well. The maximum fee in a single-family unit, $9,535, and a multifamily unit, $4,508. The revenue that could be generated through these are estimated to be about $8 million a year. And over a projected 10-year period, $80 million would be a significant in helping us to offset any taxes that are needed for continued expansions or additions of schools. So again, it helps to lower the borrowing on upcoming projects, and we would use it on a fee pay-as-you-go basis. So using the dollars each year are accumulated over a couple of years to generate to pay directly to those projects in the service area. And lastly, on the financial side of things, school debt millage, we generate about $2 million per mill on school debt millage. So an $8 million source of revenue would potentially save about 4 mills in tax revenue. So just look forward to further conversations with you, and I think Ms. Crutchfield may have more information on the growth and the capital project side, but we do have a major renovation planned, both in the current referendum at Hilton Head Middle this year, but also we're beginning some design projects for Hilton Head High School with the anticipation of making some major renovations and potentially expanding the class sizes, or classrooms, either at the high school or one of the elementary schools. So we do have a list of projects or a project identified for additional class space in the Hilton Head area. So with that, Carol, do you have anything to add? Or?
Do you have a question?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
The impact fee is south of the Broad County. The school debt millage is countywide.
Yes. Yes, sir.
The impact fee for a single dwelling, you indicated was 9,000 plus.
Yes.
What is it today?
0.
0, correct.
We are collecting in the unincorporated areas of Beaufort County currently, and so that is the only area that is currently collecting revenue.
Have you tested this yet with the Realtor Association or with the area builders?
Dr. Rodriguez?
No, actually, I have spoken in front of them, but we have not had an in-depth presentation to the Realtors Association.
And obviously, you wouldn't be doing this unless you needed the capital for necessary capital improvements. If this vehicle turns out to be untenable, what are the alternatives? Assuming you still want to go ahead and accumulate 8 per year or 80 in total over 10.
Yep. So to the first part of your question, just as a history component for us in Beaufort County School District, as I mentioned at the beginning, there's limited ways for us to address the capital needs, right? And as a school district, we were unsuccessful in passing a referendum for over 11 years. And so we just recently, thank you to our community, thank you very much to our community, we're able to address a lot of capital maintenance needs that we had within the school district with the passage of the referendum in 2019, we began that work. So that has been very, very helpful in us getting our facilities, so we're starting to get our facilities to a better place for a more conducive learning environment. But the Community Project Review Committee that was formed to look at that referendum had identified well over $600 million worth of projects, and we couldn't do that. So we went in 2019 with a $344 million bond referendum, which thankfully passed, and our community was extremely supportive. I'm grateful for that. So this is another way for us to address needs. To your second part of your question,
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? I was so focused on.
I was interested in, if you're not able to use this vehicle,
Yes.
what other
Okay.
vehicles are available?
Referendum and 8% dollars are the only capital projects we have available. So we have certain limitations. We generally spend $20 to $25 million a year on 8% projects. Those are roof replacements, HVAC, major painting of schools, and major equipment upgrades that may need to occur. We have, finite limitations on those dollars. The only other alternative is a referendum, bond referendum, through voter approval.
If I might elaborate on that a little bit, I think the town council should keep in mind that the impact fees for schools or any impact fee does not apply to redevelopment. So if you have properties that are being rebuilt, being torn down, repurposed, and things like that, school impact fees would not be applicable in those particular cases. When Mr. Orlando was speaking to the conversions of commercial properties, while that would conversion of commercial property to residential would trigger a school impact fee, it would be offset by the reduction of other impact fees such as transportation and things like that, because presumably the trips from commercial to residential would be being reduced, so the transportation impact fees in those particular cases would be reduced a little bit. If it's a workforce housing project, the county council has a fund whereby the county council can either pay a portion of those impact fees to take the burden off of people doing affordable housing, or to pay the fees entirely if it's at 60% of annual median income instead of 80%. So if it's 80% of annual median income, the county council would pay up to 60% of the impact fee for that fund, therefore reducing the burden of the person developing that. If it's based on 60% of AMI, then the county council would pay 100% of the impact fee.
Eric, is that chiseled in stone?
It is chiseled in stone. It's actually in the impact fee ordinance that was adopted by the county council. And then the third thing I would point out to you, two additional things, is that while there's no growth here right now, that I think one of the previous concerns is, what's going to happen to the schools on Hilton Head Island if we do this? As you all redevelop these properties and are successful in workforce housing, in 4, 5, 6 years, there might be a need for additional capacity to the Hilton Head Island schools. The impact fee study has to be updated by statute every 5 years in order to keep pace of the changes in the demographics. And then finally, I would point out to you that you all on Hilton Head Island, and we're grateful for it because the value of the properties here are already bearing a lot of the burden of county services and fees and things like that. If you have to do a referendum that's paid back through ad valorem taxes and things like that to add these schools all over the county, then that's going to greatly impact the people on the island that own properties where they're paying non-owner occupied property taxes. Residents, not so much so full-time residents, but non-owner occupied properties would pay a greater burden of those portions of the fees for doing a referendum as opposed to the impact fee. So in my opinion, the impact fee, school impact fee, is a great way to balance the difference between people building new housing that creates the needs for additional schools and infrastructure versus those that have been living here a long time or having property here that live here full-time without having to pay that difference.
I see the value, I see the value of generating X millions of dollars a year to help with education. I think that's public good. Likewise, public good can be served by the development of workforce housing. And I appreciate the degradation of the fee based upon the percent of workforce in a particular project. I would just challenge all of us to think about waiving that fee entirely for workforce housing. Why we're trying to cobble together different sources of revenue to provide the opportunity for more people to work here, which we desperately need. And while I see the value of a impact fee, I think we should be cautious about universally applying it to, especially when you're dealing with something that is equally important from a public good standpoint.
Yeah, and now let me elaborate on that if I might. The state statute doesn't allow a total waiver of the impact fee. So when I speak to waiver of impact fee, because even affordable housing projects, you have to keep everything in the impact fee statute. You have to keep everybody on a level playing field, whether it's a house that's generating a lot of, that's for market rate housing or affordable housing. The impact to the school system is theoretically still the same. So it's all, impact fees are all about proportional share of paying for that service. So that's why the county council has to have a separate fund to pay those impact fees for workforce housing. And we're happy to talk to you all about, doing more at 80% than the 60% reduction. We can put that language, and the town of Bluffton has requested that we look at that at this point. We can have that discussion. So if you all said, well, if it's 80% AMI, we would like for those to be considered for the 100% waiver from the county fund, then we can have that discussion with you all as well. But I would just encourage you all as town council to work with the county on this particular issue in the school district. It's a great opportunity for you all to take a leadership position in the county on this particular issue without having a detrimental impact to the development and the redevelopment on the island, because a lot of the redevelopment projects that you are looking at would not have to pay these fees, and those that do, if it's workforce housing, then the impact fee for schools would be greatly reduced in that particular case.
Eric, is the vote by,
Explanation.
sorry, Bill.
No, just
Is
saying
the
thank
vote
you.
by municipality, or does the county have the vote?
Well, the county has adopted the school impact fee for unincorporated area. So the way the statute works, and it would not apply to you all, but if an unincorporated area adopts an impact fee statute, and then a municipality annexes property that is bound by that impact fee in the unincorporated area of the county, then that municipality either has to collect that impact fee or they have to agree to provide that service. You all don't plan to annex any new property outside of your existing boundaries, so it would not be applicable to you all. So if you adopt an impact fee and you want the municipalities to collect that impact fee, then you have to enter into an intergovernmental agreement with those municipalities to collect that fee and turn that money back over to the authority managing the fee for the school district. So you would transfer the money to us, we would put it in a segregated account, and then we would transfer the funds to the school district.
Let me rephrase the question. If Bluffton and Hardyville approve the impact fee and we don't,
Yeah,
is that a possibility?
it is a possibility.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Greenway, you mentioned that the statute does not allow for waiving the impact fee, but you can pay up to 100%.
The statute doesn't allow the impact fee to be waived. It has to be paid regardless by someone. The county council up to this point and that's going to continue, has said for workforce and affordable housing under these scenarios, we're going to pay this fee to the impact fee account on behalf of those developers that are developing workforce and affordable housing.
For that.
Do what?
What's the funding source?
General fund, county general fund.
How coming out of,
Avalon
does that
taxes.
come from?
Ad valorem taxes
thank you, that's what I, that's
and
that's
other,
what I was looking
and other revenues generated from fees and all, so.
Thank you. Not to belabor the point, but I think it's important. I think there was a report, Dr. Rodriguez, that the populations within the schools, particularly on Hilton Head, have increased to a degree, but in the Hispanic population, right? And we are looking to provide an environment for folks to live, work, and play on Hilton Head, okay? And the school system is definitely a big part of that, and we want to make sure that we're supporting. But we also have to realize, as my colleagues have mentioned here, we're in a crisis on Hilton Head when it comes to shelter for these families. So I understand that we can't legally waive it, but we've got to get creative about how we pay it outside of forcing these families to pay it, because I think you mentioned $9,000. I mean, that may get lost in the rounding on $1 million home on the beach, but that could make a difference as to if someone's going to live on Hilton Head or not for some of these families that we're talking about. So that's an important piece that I think needs to be first and foremost in our conversations.
Jimmy?
Yeah, and we do that same thing. So there have been a few instances in the last year or two where folks have been placing dwellings on Hilton Head Island, and their income levels, individual income levels, were such that we could pay their impact fees for them. And we have a process internally at the county to work with the town in order to do that. We fill out the paperwork, we send it over to our finance department, and we pay those impact fees into the appropriate accounts that we're required to manage.
Tammy?
I just have a question about the financial impact. It says maximum fee, and then it gives the single-family unit and then a multi-family unit price. I'm just curious about the breakdown of how the fees are calculated. And then just also interested, I guess, somewhat to what Mr. Brown was referring to, a single-family unit being close to double.
Yeah, so it's about proportional share. Again, the impact fee statute in the state of South Carolina works on proportionality. So for a single-family home, and most folks think that, a lot of folks, because they don't understand multifamily demographics versus single-family demographic, think that there's more children actually that live in apartments or multifamily projects than single-family. Actually, that's not true. It only takes 33 single-family homes to, on average, to equal the number of children that live in 100 apartments or multifamily units in a given development area. So that's why it's much larger for a single-family home, because the impact to the school system, based on the consultant's review and work, statistically and proportionally, is much greater to the school system for single-family homes than it is for multifamily homes, because proportionally, multifamily homes have less children.
Right, understanding that, and thank you for the explanation. I just wonder on Hilton Head, since, what was it, 29% of those permits, and probably many of the 71% behind the gates permits are, and I guess our statistics will start to bear this out as we go a little bit further, but are for short-term rentals where there are no families living in those homes. And so it's just a number of pieces to the puzzle that, for me, needs to be put together in terms of how that really applies to our situation here. But I'll
Any
leave it
other
there for
questions
now.
from members of the council? We won't take any public comment at this time until the very end. Dr. Rodriguez, thank you very much for coming. Sorry, our bridge slowed you down.
No, not at all, but thank you very much for having us. Appreciate seeing all of you, and thank you for your all support all the time, so appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Eric, are you going to say a few words? You okay? You good? Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Good to see you all again. Thank you, appreciate it. Back to you, Mr. Orlando.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Rodriguez, team, Eric, thank you for being here. All right, where were we? We were talking about the assessment that we were a part of for a housing trust fund, in fact, we started to take a look at a regional housing trust fund, right? Not a local housing trust fund. We've done a little bit of work. County's bringing it forward. They're going to soon ask us if this is really a go or no go. And I think at this point, they simply want an answer. And I'll bring that forward to all of you in an appropriate agenda in the weeks or months to come. So real quick though, for today's purpose, I've really asked the question, and I've had the question asked of me a few times, what's the difference between a housing trust fund that we're trying to plan for, and does Charleston have a housing trust fund? Does Aiken have a housing trust fund? Does Nashville have a housing trust fund? And so we really started to dive into this a little bit, above and beyond the proposal that came to us from the county. And really, for today's purpose, is just I want to make a point here that there's a difference in housing trust funds across our country. And some are regional and some are local, right? When we talk to our friends and partners in Charleston, they have a local housing trust fund. They do not, it is not a major piece of their business, but it's not a regional model. And there are other examples of successful regional models, which we saw in the consultant's report. So up here, and just for argument's sake, I tried to compare regional versus local, right? Regional, local dollars pooled for the region to address regional housing needs. The priority of the dollars are based upon the board. We would definitely have a seat on the board. It would definitely help a regional model. There are opportunities regionally. I do think that we could make sure that there are projects on Hilton Head Island that benefit from the Regional Housing Trust Fund, right? And so the goal of this isn't to just take a dollar and get out of it a dollar. It's to leverage regional dollars to benefit the deal at hand, and that deal could be within the region. And then you can see the local. I won't get into it, but the likelihood of a local regional housing trust fund is 100% in our favor. If it's local, it's not 100% over time if it's regional. And I think it's just a matter of what is it that we're trying to solve.
Mark?
Mark, I think what you're saying here is in a regional trust fund that is supported by the town of Hilton Head Island, how many of those dollars will come back to assist with the housing needs here on Hilton Head Island versus other parts of the county? And so that's the sensitive part of all of this. I see value in regional participation and cooperation, but when it gets down to spending dollars, that's where our taxpayers get in an uproar, and for good reason, in my opinion.
Understood.
Thank you.
Understood.
Thank you. Go to regional, the last bullet on regional. That seems to be conflicting language to me, so I obviously don't understand it. Could you clarify? In other words, I'm reading that we have a higher resource gap on the island, which equals less likelihood of local projects. I would think would be the converse.
Okay. I'm going to dive in. You've dove into the regional model.
Yeah, that relates to the sort of the barriers to projects. So cost of land, cost of materials. Materials go up as you cross the bridge, and so the resources needed to implement a project here versus in Hardyville or in Bluffton are greater because the costs are greater. We looked at median permit values without land. That land barrier is significantly higher here than it is. So that's why you end up with less likelihood of getting projects here locally with a regional model.
Well, it would seem that if you're developing a widget off island and a widget on island, then our widgets would be more expensive. So shouldn't we be asking for proportionately more?
We are a donor municipality, always have been, probably always will be. We're a donor county. statewide. And this is no different. In the spirit of regionalism, it makes sense to consider something like this. However, there is a conflict embedded in the business model in and of itself, and the conflict involves local dollars going regionally. And how do we answer taxpayers when they ask, why are you allowing our local tax dollars to be used regionally? And I guess the answer would be because those regional projects are supporting workforce housing and workforce on the island. The other part of the conflict is the Regional Housing Trust Fund, when considering a project on Hilton Head Island, has to consider the higher cost of the construction. And how can they justify that? And those two issues are embedded in conflict in this business model, and there's no way around it.
Well, maybe we should think, keying off Mr. Lennox's comments, that from a regional standpoint, we take the perspective that all ships rise with the tide. And although we could be participating regionally, that would not preclude us from doing our own locally also, correct?
Agree.
Okay. So without having, just in reaction to this and Tom's well spelled out conflict, there's another conflict. And the way that conflict, I think, might unfold is that under the very best circumstances, our very best efforts, we will never satisfy all of our workforce housing needs on the island. And so perhaps it makes sense to help contribute to those off-island that would be beneficial to those workers who come onto the island. I mean, we're certainly building a big bridge for them so that that piece can be checked off. So I think that's the other conflict. Where's the desire for what's our goal on the island? It can't be, in my opinion, what's outlined in the housing consultant's report, because we just don't have the capacity in terms of land on the island to satisfy that need in that way. So I think that's another conflict that certainly exists. When we talk about folks who work on the island, not living on the island, people get very upset. So those are a lot of the pieces that have to be teased out, that we really have to think about. It's not as simple as one or the other. And so that's a conversation I'd really like to have, is what is our goal, and our honest goal, an honest goal of what we can truly accomplish, and then what beyond that. And if it's not on the island, does a regional housing trust fund make sense then? But to begin with, I think that the idea of managing our own needs should stay local.
Alex?
Makes sense? I hope so.
I don't have anything on this, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, I think Tammy's making a lot of sense, that if we have a consultant report that says we have a shortage of this workforce housing. Odds are we don't have the capacity here to address that. So we need to agree very pragmatically on a metric that is doable, instead of just this self-flagellation all the time saying we don't have it, we keep trying to, we're never going to get there. So let's have a realistic goal and then work toward it.
Mr. Orlando, I will meet with you today, and we will assign this to one of the committees, and we'll bring it forward the second meeting in March for a vote. Things can't go on forever. We should discuss it outwardly and then make a vote.
Okay. All right. Josh, you got that, just as a note?
Second meeting
Okay.
in March.
All right. I ran out of room on my paper to write. I'm gonna move on here. And so, it's just backing up in a quick reminder, because we stopped, but what I'd like to do today is talk about what's current, what are we working on when everybody's at work, and a proposal. So with that being said, we talked quickly about the conversion, the density bonus. We had some good feedback. We gave some results. Housing Trust Fund, we talked about that. A quick reminder, August 19th was a good day. We received American Rescue Plan funds shortly before that, prior to a lot of other municipalities and counties in our state, in South Carolina, prior to them receiving the funds, and we jumped out of the gate and worked with you as a council, and then we worked with the state and the feds to understand the use of these dollars and brought back to you a proposal that you adopted. Some of these programs, or I would say some of these component pieces of that program, are live and well, and others are about to take shape and be in motion in the next 30 days. So real quick, $1 million earmarked to the Community Foundation, $1 million into Town Hall facility for security technology, $1 million into housing infrastructure. It was clear. We talked a little bit at that time about the Patterson Tract, and I'll share some updates with you about that. I finally figured out how to use this. $400,000 towards a home repair program, $200,000 towards lateral sanitary sewer connection and grants, as well as we simply parked $1.6 million in public infrastructure with a TBD. That could be road, water, sewer, stormwater, broadband. It could be a lot of things, but it's parked there for a little bit. $5,227,178 to be spent. So you asked, and we are in motion to assess our town properties. Big job, lots of file cabinets, lots of work. What we're excited about is that we've taken the file cabinets and we've converted it to a geographic information system map. The map is interactive, so it's not just a static map with nice colors. You can click on the particular piece and we can start learning about that particular piece in real time and as it affects use. It will tell us how it was bought, when it was bought, are there any covenants, are there any restrictions, what are the funding sources? And so what we started to do, and I'm not there yet, and so the question was, should we push this meeting off? I didn't want to, I wasn't going to propose, hey, let's try this again. What I suggest is that, respectfully, this is a big to-do, and we want to get it right. We're on version 3 of it. Really, I would say V3 of this assessment, and one ordinance, one press release, one file at a time, over 1,400 acres through time, and I appreciate all the work that's gone into it. But the goal at a certain point, and we're not there today, is to eliminate the untouchables. Let's paint them dark green, let's put a covenant on them, and let's say they're off the books forever, and let's be real clear that we can't convert a beach park or a public park to a housing or a hotel or a job, right? So there's restrictions on these properties. But then there's also some that were bought with TIF dollars or tax revenue dollars, or certain instances where the real estate transfer fee acquired built or developed or entitled property, and we can downzone. So it's not an easy answer of yes or no. It's not a green or red on a map that I can easily show you. So I ask that you give us a little more time, and that in about 30, 45 days that we come back here and we show you the interactive map, that we show you which piece was bought with what funding source. Curtis has definitely been close by as I'm looking at this for the first time. I know Josh has some experience. Sean has a lot of experience as a team. If we all don't know, we collectively blame Sean because he should know. And Sean just looks at Curtis and we're right, But I think the good part of this is that we're scrubbing it. And so if you look at all the different land acquisition funding sources, beach fee, bonds, and several bonds. Sean, you said there were 5 bonds. What were the years?
I think 97, 2000, 2007, 10, or 3, 10, and
Yeah.
97,
Yeah.
98.
Okay, so there we go. Real estate transfer fee, H-tax, TIF money, CIP funds. And CIP funds could be a lot of different things. Stormwater utility, well, some stormwater utility funds were used to acquire ditches and easements and whatnot. Real estate transfer fee acquired most of the corridor of William Hilton Parkway. The beautiful green corridor was bought with real estate transfer fee. But so are some properties that are vacant, and so are some properties that have structures or entitlements. So exchange agreements, joint ownership, donations, and grants. So across the board. And so we can see the exercise that's being done. This map,
Mark, you omitted one, I think.
okay,
American Rescue Funds.
okay. We didn't acquire anything with those funds.
No, but it is a funding source, it seems to me, if that
Okay.
fits that definition.
Okay.
Mark, going forward, I'd like to see this chart expanded for a third column, and that third column would deal with development funding. Certainly, one could be the private sector, where you get a developer contributing 100% to build the project.
Right.
The other, another could be that we've kicked around but haven't done anything about yet, would be the disposition of town land that can be used for development. We may have bought it for $1, and it has a price point today in the market of $3. How do we approach that? How are we willing to approach that? Are we going to go for the 3? Are we going to go back to the 1? Would we possibly donate it? Would we possibly lease it?
Right. So where I started, and I maybe need to better explain this, where I started was simply here. How did the town buy these properties? Not what can they be used for? What are we going to do later? What?
Right, and I think what
it
you've
was
done
simply,
is great.
yeah.
I'm just saying, going forward.
So as an assessment for today, I understand and have a note. How do we extrapolate not just a funding source, but what to do with it in the future? And in order to do that, what I'd like to do is be really clear of what properties have a chance and what properties are absolutely off limits. And as a council, I think over time, there were agreements on that. Did a bond buy it? Did a real estate transfer fee buy it? Was there a land swap? If there was, is there a covenant? And again, what we're trying to do is simply build a map, a geographic information system that we don't have to go chase one file drawer at a time to figure out. We have great technology. The technology has changed over time. This is not a slight of how we keep records. The records are fabulous. But we've changed town attorneys, right? There was, Curtis was here, Curtis wasn't here, Curtis is here again. There are different methods and styles in how we file and how we keep record. And so for the first time, and I think for forever, we will build that record that's fully transparent and available at the community's fingertips, the council's fingertips, and then somebody like me or John or anybody else trying to understand what we can do with a piece of land is important. So,
Mark, I think we'd like to do, go ahead, Alex.
This is so critical to all of our discussions, okay?
yes,
If we've got 100 properties, end of the day, we find out that only 2 can be used. It's a totally different discussion that we're having, right?
sure.
So making sure that this is absolutely right is something that we owe the community, all right? So I appreciate you taking a bit more time with it. I appreciate what staff has done thus far with it. I'd also appreciate another set of eyes on it, okay? It's Hilton Head, okay? I'm gonna say that out loud, all right? You can ride around the town and look at signs that we've put up on property that we've bought. That sign means absolutely nothing. Because there's a chance that you could use it for something, and there's a chance that you can't. But the signs say that we cannot do anything with it. To that point, I think that just a little bit more due diligence again, going back to another set of eyes, I think is important because we as a council, we as staff, we can't take that ownership of this property because it belongs to the people. And we've got to be overly confident that the answer that we give as to what we can do and what we can't do is real. So I just offer that, Mr. Manager, that we do have another expert take a look at what we have in front of us, what we're going to present to the community, just because it's changed hands so many times.
Mark, I'd like to do just 2 steps. One is I'd like the second set of eyes to look at it, which we already arranged for. And the second step is complete this map as to what can be used and what can't be used, and don't put anything else in it until we finish that. I'd also like it done by the last day of March for a public hearing, so the public can look at that map, see the map, and ask questions on the map.
Okay. Krista's flagged the date. Please know that we look at this often. I apologize that it's not done yet, but it seems that the files are deep and we don't want to make mistakes. And so know that there's a process in place and
Oh, yeah.
so, okay.
Mark, I salute you and staff's effort to absolutely understand what restrictions apply so that we know what we're really dealing with. That's invaluable to us. Thank you.
You're welcome, sir. Thank you.
Yours.
Yes. The question I have is that of the current assessment of town-owned properties under land acquisition funding sources, is there a shortcut or a shorthand way of saying which ones are restricted, or is it also based on how it's currently zoned? Does that question make sense?
I wish I could say, yes, there's a shortcut, right? So we can easily look at our beach parks and just take them off the books, but I don't want to be satisfied with just that because I don't know what 15 years from now brings. It's colored blue on a map. It's a beach park. It's called the parking lot at Coligny. What if somebody asks us next week, should we put housing there? I don't want to just say, oh, it's a beach park. We really need to know how it was bought, how it was acquired, what are the covenants. I also think that this is a really important time that we could take a look at that map, and to your point, Ms. Becker, the shortcut needs to be, let's make sure it's very clear that there's certain properties. This island, and I make it clear from my vantage point, Hilton Head Island is known in the nation as a community that preserved land. It took units off the table to develop. It took commercial and residential and everything in between off the table to develop. I know that. I just know that from my career, but I also know that because as I talk to folks across the state and beyond, they know Hilton Head Island for that. And other folks have borrowed or used that method, the land acquisition program that Mr. Stanford worked on, countywide is live and strong here. I think it's really important that we get our hands around or wrap our arms around this and then paint our map what is truly untouchable, not just from a covenant standpoint, but also from a community value standpoint. And so I think that is really important as part of this exercise of what can I use for housing and what needs to be included in. Let's also be making the bigger picture decision of all the properties. And I think that's been made over time. I think there's people that will sit here and tell me, you just got here, this has been made, but we're building the map. And I think that to bring us current, let's go through a out loud exercise.
May I just follow up? That is, I'm just basically going to restate what you just said, because I don't think, from my perspective, there's too much disagreement. There's the funding sources, there are covenants, but I think also, if not equally, certainly, I would say, more importantly, the community expectations. Those signs that we see around the island that say town-owned property, those of us who have been around a long time and those who come onto the island are so deeply grateful for those parcels of land that have been held and are green, and present to us an expectation that they'll remain that way. And the part of the quality of life that we looked and expect on Hilton Head Island is wrapped up in that expectation of that green. And so 3 components equal, but I would put the emphasis on what our community expectations are overall. So, thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we have this map, and it's a great map, and appreciate the work that's going into it to really assess it. And congratulations to everyone who's worked hard to acquire those properties over time. I think we need to be mindful of that. So I looked at properties. I'm sure my phone will ring off the hook as soon as I show some of these, but the exercise was simply to take a look at some properties that we thought, that I thought, that others thought might make some sense. Well, and we're going to go through one at a time today. I'm just kidding. We're not going to do that. We've taken a look at some of the high priority, or at least some of the obvious parcels, and we simply just started to look at them. And so today I want to show you several properties that we looked at, but talk about only one in particular. That doesn't mean we shouldn't talk about the others at the March date, but I'd like to talk about one today because it seems that there's a little more room to make sense of that immediately and move forward. So with that being said, we've taken a look at the Indigo Run Hotel Tract. The reason I put this on here, it's important. Folks have called and said, hey, this is a great piece. It's on Marshland Road. It's on a bus route. It's near the Parkway. It's next to residential. It's flat. It has water access. What an amazing neighborhood that would be. Well, if we're developers, absolutely. But as community development, in the business of community development, we go back and we say, okay, does the tract make sense? Absolutely. How did we buy it? It was bought with 1997 bond referendum money, repaid with a real estate transfer fee and a 2000 bond referendum. And if I look at my tool here, 1997 bond referendum for $15 million, the ordinance ordered a referendum not to exceed 15 million, and the council find the funds of the acquisition of lands for management of growth and development, public facilities, passive and active park, and preservation of historic site, furthers the goal of this council and all preceding councils and is consistent with the goals of the comp plan. And as we dig a little deeper, purchasing developed and undeveloped land on Hilton Head for the public use or uses of management of growth and development, public facilities, passive, active parkland, and preservation of historic sites. If Google wanted to be there, we, as a job center and as a great neighborhood, could go there to advance housing choices on our island based upon how the property was purchased. For me, at this time, it seems to be off the table.
Alex?
Mr. Orlando, when you bring us the final product, while you were reading all of those stipulations, it sparked the thought, maybe it's time for us to also consider our land acquisition policy. Because it seems to me that if there was a number dollar-wise that we were trying to get to back when this was purchased or any other of these properties, and we didn't necessarily have it, then maybe we looked at other funding sources to get to that number, and I'm not quite sure that was the right way to do business. So as you bring it forward to us, I think we need to just dust that off and take a look at how we buy property, particularly since it's so scarce on Hilton Head at the moment, right?
And we looked at Lego Mutton 2003 bond referendum, right? The old concrete plant as we know it. It's in an interesting location. It might make sense. We don't know what the units down the street will do to the traffic flow. By no means are we advocating these properties, but we're simply showing you the process that we've looked at. It's zoned planned unit development. It's almost 5 acres, but it was bought with bond referendum money, very similar. Patterson Estate, parcel 77 on the map is what we really looked at. There's those 2 pieces in the red. It's right across from Alex Patterson Road. I think that the fact that it's close to the roundabout close to shops, on the water. Yes, early on, I was excited. John and I talked, hey, this might make sense to park some American Rescue Plan funds there. Well, as we start looking at the site from a due diligence standpoint, one, it's in a 100-year flood zone, and I don't think it's appropriate for that reason. I think it's appropriate for housing for a lot of reasons, but the fact that it's in a 100-year flood, let alone it was built, purchased with 2000 bond referendum and some transfer fee, again, adds those strings, adds those issues, or I would say adds a value that it shouldn't be developed. Office Park Road tract, it was acquired with real estate transfer fee. That is next to USCB. Sorry, I was searching for it. It's right here. There's USCB. If housing is needed for USCB, potentially USCB could locate their, some units on site. They could also work with private property owners close by, but the lands that surround USCB for housing, one, this is, what's it called, boggy gut? Yeah. It's wet. It's an important environmental place on our island. And at the same time, we acquired it with real estate transfer fee that has some obstacles to as well, right? According to what my conversations with Curtis, I don't want to speak for you, but as vacant land was acquired with real estate transfer fee, it was to take units off the table or at least mitigate those trips. Well, anything above and beyond raw land is in an adverse conflict with mitigating trips. So something to think about, and again, we can talk more about this in another month. Palmetto Bay Road tract, so it was acquired with real estate transfer fee as well as some tax revenue. And so now we start getting into, it was acquired with some tax revenue. We know that some time ago, the town posted this as an opportunity and worked closely with John O'Toole and Beaufort County Economic Development Corporation to try to make sense of this as a commercial site. But if this was a commercial mixed-use site, there are some residential restrictions in the business park. I'm not saying that they're impossible to overcome, but again, there's some work to do to think through this. I really like this site as an opportunity, a lot more than any others so far, to start thinking through an economic development and/or housing solution on Hilton Head. We took a look at modern classic motors, with the exception of one piece. Sean, I think purchase funding was tax revenue, and then there was also some text in the past. It's not up here now. It was one of the parcels, bottom left, has some restrictions. What are those restrictions?
There are covenants on that piece that were, with Palmetto Dunes, that were required to be used as a car lot.
Okay. So, again, right? Yeah, and Curtis, that's one of the things we have to kind of dive in. Curtis, he said, well, I think we got rid of that. So again, let's come together. But, what an interesting place from an economic development standpoint. And I know that Mr. O'Toole is working on some marketing materials, some drone footage, some real site assessment, and trying to see what the highest and best use of this site is from a job perspective. Don't want to put words in his mouth, but John, I appreciate that you're here today with us, sir.
Mark, are you saying that is not restricted?
It's not restricted.
Thank you.
Mid-Island, purchased with bond referendum is what I found. The acquisition of this was bond referendum. And so here's the position I'm in. I'm told that there are no restrictions on it. I'm told that some don't want housing. I'm told that some do want housing. On a council, I'm hearing from the community equally on some of those issues. We're finally diving into this. A little late. I'm sorry that it is so late. We talked to a consultant about housing. We had him perform some at least capacity site planning. We've heard from folks in the neighborhood surrounding it, not just Port Royal, but Port Royal, from the residents, some of our own thoughts. But I always get back to, and it's probably, not probably, it's where we should have started from the beginning, is how did you buy the property? How was the property purchased? And so, lesson learned for me, because I'm going by what I believe someone's advice was traveling down the line. Now it's becoming institutional knowledge, where in fact, we need to pull the file drawer and look at the ordinance, the covenants, the restrictions, and not just, tell MKSK, hey, housing might work here. In fact, the more I think about this, housing, to me, makes sense on Dillon Road if we could make sense of it. But as we look at this, it was bought with 2008 bond referendum. How do we resolve that? I think our March 31st or a little later meeting, as we take a look at the money source of buying this property, needs to serve as that only point of reference to get started. So, more to come. North End Post Office tract, bought with CIP funds, real estate transfer fee, and so as I, amongst a whole bunch of others, I'll go back real quick to show you, amongst a real assessment and a lot of driving, we get to this piece. It's right next to the post office. It's across the street from Island Rec and the school complex, close to Main Street. It's 11.45 acres. It was bought with property, it was bought with funds that allow for some development. And so for my purpose over the last 60 days, I've really worked on this piece only. We know it's close to the schools. We know it contains some partial infrastructure. That's a water tower, if you wonder what that is. It's located in flood zone X. It can be rezoned for residential. It's not a spot zone. It wouldn't be just like, oh, hey, we really think housing should belong here. Residential's next to it. There's some issues with it, though. Of course, it's not in a great accessible location if you look at this site as a right in, right out on already a busy corridor. But we've done a little work on it to try to understand its surroundings. And so, again, properties right here, point of reference, Wild Horse, Marsh Point, Gumtree, and right ground zero of intersections on our island. But post office, and excited to take a look at how it makes sense with the school campus, the island rec. And again, I don't think that every single person that lives here will have a student in this school as a requirement. But as we take a look at housing and workforce, I think that we have to be mindful that being able to walk to get a jug of milk, candy bar, or to play basketball at the rec center should be something that we're trying to figure out. And so as we looked at that, we started to just try to understand the built environment a little differently. And I realized this, and it's obvious, right? We can't do this by ourselves. In the private sector, I think if they could, would have already started to do this or really desired to without anybody's help, we'd have applications. Again, someone said earlier, it's Hilton Head Island. Yes, sir.
Well, we need this piece of property. What's the next steps?
They're baked into like 4 slides from now. Thank you, Ms. Becker.
Just a quick question, going back to the Mid-Island Tract. On that old Port Royal plantation, does it have restrictions over that land as well?
In the Port Royal PUD? Oh, you mean does Port Royal have restrictions on the Mid-Island Tract?
There's nothing there.
He's shaking his head no.
I'm told by the POA that there are restrictions as part of the original covenants, as part of the open space requirement for Port Royal PUD.
Yes, sir, that's correct. There are open space as well as pervious, impervious requirements that would need to be maintained as that tract is put into use as a park or something different.
But it's not restrictions of open space only. There's some, and again, I think that we can identify that for you. I'm not prepared to show you all that today, but yeah, there are some restrictions, but based upon those restrictions, it doesn't negate any anything. But when we go back to the money source, I think that's where we really have to, scrub that.
We have to have legal justification for that.
Right, okay. So as I took a look at this, one of the exercise for me today is to ask you if I can proceed with the following in the following manner, right? And so a reminder, I asked for, a lot of work from staff, a lot of input from council. We asked to present to you a home safety and repair program, safe and dry, as well as removal of unsafe, uninhabited structures. We've put a great program together. Again, thank you to Sean and a lot of good folks and Jamie. We will propose as an agenda item for the March Finance and Administrative Committee to bring forward households earning up to 60% AMI, a certain amount of grant, potentially $10,000 as a grant for home repair. Keep your home safe and dry, fix your roof, fix your porch, fix your windows, abatement and or demo of unsafe, uninhabited structures on owned property, as well as some hazard tree trimming or removal. We look at this as a housing program proposal to improve the quality of life where you currently live. We also are proposing really in conjunction or in concert with Project SAFE, as we know from the PSD that there's some grants available for lateral connections. Congrats again to everybody that worked on establishing main trunk lines for water sewer on Hilton Head Island, but we know that some folks have not hooked up. Maybe it's just a matter of leave me alone. Maybe it's a matter of finances. But I want to take a look at this, not just from an income qualification, but from an environmental qualification too, so we can see that the proposal is up to 100% different than the prior 60%. Again, F&A committee in March, priority to applicants who receive some grants and or are denied by Project SAFE for some different reasons. We're trying not to replicate what they do and simply add to the bucket. We're trying to expand their program, and it is a good one.
Well, for that, Mark, you're proposing that F&A take a look at this. I need to get this off before I lose it. The capacity fees, because the town has been so aggressive in purchasing property, a lot of, and let's just say that there are going to be restrictions on those properties. A lot of the load that would be put on the public district service has gone away because the land will never be developed. Okay, so a conversation around capacity fees, I think, should be assigned to this committee also.
Good point.
Okay. And I'm not quite sure I 100% tracking what you're asking us to do with F&A, but maybe we can chat offline to understand it. I think there's some opportunities with our PSDs to be in partnership here. All right, so that will come forward in both in March, right? One, home safety up to 60, the other sewer connection up to 100. And then today, I should say, want to propose that we seek a partner through a housing public-private partnership. I always look back at the Urban Land Institute for some direction. I've taken these key principles right out of the public-private partnership materials that they produce. But really the goal is to increase affordable housing supply on the island by partnering on development of workforce and affordable housing. It's as simple as that. That we look for a partner with expertise in financing and development. And there are some key principles of public-private partnerships. I think that as we work, if you would give me direction as we work forward, I know that we need to make sure that all these key principles are being addressed, right? From preparing properly to creating a shared vision, understanding our partners, being clear on our risks, establishing a decision-making process, making sure we all do our homework. This is a challenging but very doable opportunity. We communicate with you, that we communicate with the community, that we communicate with our partner all the time, and that the deal be fair. I think people will do business with us if we try to put a partnership together that isn't fair. We're right back where we started 7 months from now. So we have to be mindful of that. And again,
Mark, can we speak to that?
yes,
I see public-private partnerships as one of the keys, if not the key, to solving our problem here. You're talking about introducing a partner, which would, I guess, assume some of the responsibility with that. It seems to me that there's also an opportunity for a private, public-private partnership, whereas if we have a parcel of land and we approach a developer and we say, we will lease this land to you on a favorable basis, provided you construct 100% workforce housing according to our definitions on that property, and then impose restrictions on conversion, various restrictions that would be necessary. In conjunction with that, it's my understanding, which may be incorrect, but it's my understanding that the city of Charleston has done exactly that. I would like, as part of this, for us to draw down someone from Charleston to give us a detailed report, share their ordinances, share their experience in conjunction with a private, public-private partnership, if you will. I think that that is vital. I think that there are probably less details and obstructions and contracts and all sorts of things that might go on in a Urban Lands Institute type of model. Thank you.
understood.
Bill?
Thank you.
Glenn said it better than I will. I think clearly speed to market is very important for us. And with all due respect to government, if we can go to the private sector and we set the tone of the meeting in terms of the principles of development, the principles of operation, the mix, and the capacity, I'm sure we would not want to work with a partner that could only do a one and done.
Right.
Because we'd like to do a rollout. And unless I'm missing something here, I would just get rid of one word up there, public. Set the tone, we as a government.
Yeah.
Tim?
Thank you, Mayor. Following up on both of those very wise comments, I'll be probably more simple the way I say it, and hopefully, if I'm wrong, correct me. I'm always tenuous at best in my thinking with regard to public partnerships, mostly because of the strings they tend to bring with them, the control that the town will likely have to give up in that relationship. So keeping this as a private partnership, certainly from my perspective, allows us to be able to have the right type of government covenants and input and direction, and know that that's what we're getting in return, not just when we sign the documents and go fulfill a vision, but also long-term. And that's an important aspect as we move along. We know from recent history where we received a grant that now has tied our hands in terms of being able to fulfill island residents' requests. So I certainly wouldn't want to see those same types of things happen down the road. Also, I know the definition by HUD, et cetera. I've done my research, but I find it interesting in documents where we change from workforce housing to suddenly, in no disparity, just stating a fact here, to affordable housing supply on the island by partnering on development of workforce and affordable housing. Can, for the benefit of everyone, we delineate, define what the two differences are?
Well, Yeah, and if, a couple slides in, I'm
You're-
explaining
I'm
some
ahead
of the.
of the my
No,
questions.
no,
No, that's
these
okay.
are good questions.
I'll slow down.
There's things we need to decide. You know, again, what are we doing? Who are we serving? Is it the first-year fireman, first-year nurse, first-year school teacher? When we looked at that matrix a bunch of slides ago, about an hour ago or so, I took a look at 80, 100, 120, 150. I'm not advocating for either. I think that a simple range of product needs to be achieved. But I will also say today, we're not prepared to answer that question because we don't know what will make the project viable, right? It's one thing to say it's got to be all 60%, and then we're not satisfied with the quality of construction. It's another thing to say it's all 150%, so the quality is great, but it's not serving the needs of the manager of the great places we like to shop and visit. So one thing that I know is that we own some land, we have some American Rescue plans parked, there are successful, and I'm not sure I understand removing the public out of the public-private partnership. That's an industry term. If we are talking about our land and our dollars, it's a public partnership along with a private partner, and I'll show you a term sheet in a second. But really, as I start thinking through this, or as we think through it together, it has to be principle-driven. What are we trying to accomplish and for who? We have so much information in the past, and I went through that. Sorry if I'm boring you or repeating, but I think it's important that we know that we have a housing strategic plan that town council adopted. We have our plan, the comp plan, you adopted. We have a strategic plan, we adopted. And if we are going to do something, I think we're at that point where some of the policy initiatives that are in place, I showed you the results. We showed you some data of the island. And through a partnership agreement, perhaps we could take a look at our responsibility in a partnership agreement versus the partner responsibility, right? So left side of the brain versus right side of the brain. Town responsibility, land contribution. We don't have to decide today whether that's $1, market value less 25% lease. Charleston's model is they're starting to look at, and I've had a lot of conversations with their chief legal counsel. They lease the property. They keep control of the property. There are other deals that we know of that the land was contributed. So I think it all depends on how do we proceed, and those are decisions that we have to make in the future. Permit and install public infrastructure up to $1 million. On the left side, second point. We talked about that's the American Rescue Plan funds, road, water, sewer, stormwater, and potentially broadband. Zoning entitlements. So if it's currently zoned Parks and Rec and it's next to housing, we could, as the partner and landowner, rezone the property rather than tell somebody else who might be our partner to do it. Financial contribution toward planning, engineering, and architectural design. I strongly encourage that. I feel strongly about it because if we're contributing, we have a seat at the table and we can affect the design of the site, the functionality of the site, and not keep reacting to it. I'm not proposing that we pay every penny of it, but I think some contribution as an incentive to our partner might make a little bit of sense. Expedite development plan review and permitting. No matter who you talk to, they say time is money. Interest carry matters, and that if we can expedite it and treat the project as a partner or as a partnership, and we help expedite that on our own accord, and that we reduce or eliminate applicable town fees. Well, we can't, and we heard from Mr. Greenway today, we cannot just eliminate or reduce Beaufort County impact fees. You have the authority to either A, pay for those impact fees as part of the project, and or B, reduce our own fees, our development permit, our building permit, and some of those fees. What would a partner bring to the table? A demonstrated experience to develop, right? So from a financial capability to complete the project in a cost-effective manner. We're looking for an experienced team, not looking for someone's first project here. We need a track record. We need to go see, touch, and understand what they're capable of from their architects, engineers, contractors, the whole 9 yards. They need an ability to carry out the activities to plan, permit, finance, and implement. And that's going to be through a cash flow pro forma analysis, right? And so this this potential partner, we would have to sit down at the table and start understanding how they're building their pro forma. And what is it really showing in their returns, and how does our investment help with that? That needs to be fully transparent amongst the council. And produce a development that's operationally sustainable, that we would also ask that the partner establish a down payment assistance program. There are funds at the state level, there are funds at nonprofit levels, there are funds that are available for down payment assistance programs. I think that if this is going to be a successful project, we need to perhaps request that of a potential partner. And that there be we wrote high quality, for lack of a better word, not a check-the-box home buyer education program and counseling, but a real one. Someone that teaches somebody how to properly own and sustain their home. And I've seen some real good examples of that, and saw personally some good success stories of good down payment assistance programs and good home buyer education classes. There's a lot to still do, so we need to assemble our municipal team. I want to make sure that I'm clear about this. Town council's involvement, our staff's involvement, consultants, financial advisor, architect, bond counsel, as well as community members, right? We talk a lot about this project, but we need to definitely include the community, stakeholders, community leaders. We need to assemble a development team, and there's a lot of different players there. I didn't list them all out. And then some considerations, getting back to the questions earlier. I don't know how to answer these questions today. Do we want to rent or sell? Do we want multifamily or single family or duplex? What is the product type? If we're building a neighborhood, I would encourage us to have a range of product types. What is the AMI range? 60, 80, 100, 120, 150? You know, at least from my perspective, the conversation is always a few ways about affordable or workforce. You always hear about low to moderate income. And you'll notice today there's nothing in here about low to moderate income. You know, and as much as I can, it's housing. I don't think we're trying to build, nor am I trying to advocate to build market rate housing. But a lot of the discussion sometimes on your AMI range is affordable is at the lower end of your index, and your workforce is at the higher level of your index. In those low to moderate income conversations, I haven't found one clear definition. I've always tried to think about it as workforce is up around your cap that's just below your market rate, right? So in some places that's 120. Here, based upon what I showed you today, it's somewhere around 135 or 140. That's where the gap starts after that. And that's where the market rate starts after that. And there's some gap below. And affordable here is, you know, less than 80. Less than 80% of our AMI. Arguably, in some cases, we could probably also say if we're trying to house the workforce, we could probably say, you know, it's not a Beaufort Housing Authority definition. I'm sure they'll school me on federal policy as it relates to these definitions. But I'm going to always get us back to what are the local definitions and how do we calibrate this locally to serve the needs. We need to figure out these items though: rent, sale, product type, AMI, land value, site planning. What are the terms? Is it dense? Is it not? I put this up here so that you can understand where at least staff's coming from. One, I'm not showing up today saying I have preconceived notions whether there should be multifamily, single family, or something in between. We know that it needs to be energy efficient, that there needs to be some programmed food supply as part of the open space, that the materials need to be pervious, so it should be a showcase, really, our flagship residential community. As much as we can have a water neutral site where we capture the stormwater on site and filter it. It's not just a small 5-lot subdivision and go. That the landscaping matters, the environment matters, and that the proximity to schools, services, and some transportation. We simply, for now, just put some reference photos up top. One, I don't want the top right to scare you, but I also don't want to say that the whole community's cottage living. And so as we looked at this, we had a land planner, Whitmer Kiefer Jones, take a look at the site. Apologize if you can't see it, but we have two models, really. This is a townhome, just from a capacity standpoint. And if we back up, you can see, for a point of reference, here's the site, here's the post office, there's Marsh Point Drive heading out. So as we took a look at the site, again, point of reference, post office, there's the water tower, and here would be the site. This capacity study is, you have the presentation in front of you, Sean, my old 50-year-old eyes. Is that 12.62 acres? Read me on the right side.
79 dwelling units.
Yeah.
Density is 6.3
So,
DUs per acre.
yeah, we're at a 6.3 density here. We have a lot of reference properties on this island. Crosswinds, one of my favorite subdivisions on the island from a density standpoint, is somewhere about 6, 8-ish. You really can fit it in with some good streets and some good planning. So that's a townhome product. It has open space, pocket parks, on-street parking, front and rear loaded townhomes. And as important to everything, one, stormwater treatment on site that's more functional and as an amenity, not in the top left corner, but a road, hopefully, that could punch through the post office on the far side of it, and we have some work to do there with the federal government and the postmaster. But if this road could punch through, we have very good access. If I can find that sheet just real quick, just show you what I meant. Right here, we have very good access into and through, these drives and these roads that could connect to the school. By no means is it a solution yet, it's concept. And then again, another option is multifamily. Second verse, Sean, how many DUs on the multifamily?
136 at 10.8.
Right, and this is multifamily buildings. But my recommendation really is, if we are going to do this, let's make sure that we're building the right neighborhood, not just trying to max out units. That's the automatic. Hey, we have to get as many units as we possibly can get. And then do we leave some open space and functionality and good living on the table? I think that my recommendation, to be a part of the architecture and design is for that reason. One, we need to make sure that this is adding value to Hilton Head Island and that the site is very livable. But those are two capacity studies, and so next steps, I would like to proceed with those two programs, the American Rescue Plan programs, to the March F&A Committee. I don't need a recommendation, but without any no's, don't come forward. I'm going to bring forward the home safety and repair for March through Mr. Lennox's committee. We'll also proceed with the sewer connection program on the March F&A Committee. Councilman Brown, I'll talk to you a little bit about your comment earlier. I want to make sure I'm 100% understanding what you're asking for. And then let's proceed with the housing public-private partnership for just now, one site, one deal. Let's learn. Allocate the $1 million in principle towards the infrastructure. Let's be clear that we have those dollars as we seek our partner. Release the RFQ no later than March 31. And establish, my recommendation is some version of an ad hoc housing committee to assess and advise on the public policy project framework for town council consideration. It could include various different folks, community members, staff members, council members. It could go through only a particular committee. It could be several council members plus a couple staff members. I think we have to think through that a little bit and help me make some decisions. One, this is not what Sean and I can figure out by ourselves and then find a partner. We have to release the RFQ. We have to assess it. We have to interview, and we have to bring back to town council some of those results so that we can confidently move forward with a contract. And there's no quick way to do that. And it's not a staff level only in my strong recommendation. I'm also, as a follow-up to last council meeting, we're also exploring a development corporation in the Stony neighborhood. And we know a couple examples that, a couple close-by examples, I should say, of development corporations that have helped advance housing opportunities. That's more complicated, right? So why would we be in a development corporation model and not just the model as presented in the term sheet? Because we want to make some we want some program proceeds, and we want to be in the business over and over and over again. That is more complicated. Perhaps that is for the second, third, or fourth time. I did not make a recommendation today that be for our first out of the gate. Simply, to Mr. Harkin's point, speed to market, right? Getting this on the street, establishing a development corporation will take some time and be in our way. It's not to say the development corporation, if not just the Stony, but perhaps a bigger look at it in the future, it might help us. And then also explore town-owned and privately owned properties. The one good idea came to me from a couple people over time is, Mark, if someone has a piece of property in a good location, could the town not provide these same incentives, infrastructure? Could we build a road? Could we put the sewer line in? Could we make the infrastructure public on private property, but we claim the right of way, we put some sewer, water, and whatnot in, stormwater, even open space, and work to advance some private properties. I think we just need to keep exploring that, but for today, what I've made the proposal on really is to advance the post office tract through a public-private partnership. We have some real good RFQ samples. We can calibrate it based upon today's discussion and feedback. And if you would so choose, let me proceed with home repair, sewer connection, and release an RFQ. I think we're going to learn a lot when we release the RFQ. I know that there's folks probably even sitting in the audience today that says, this won't work. And I also have people calling me saying, when are you going to release the RFQ? I can't, when can we get started? Do I have to go through a process? So we're going to hear a lot. And what I do know, having been through this in the past, is we're going to learn a lot about developing workforce and affordable housing, call it what you will. We're going to learn a lot about Hilton Head Island costs, land values, financing, who's interested. We're going to learn a lot through this process, and I think that we have to keep an open mind. A housing partnership that Charleston released some time ago, they got 3 bids. And other times they don't get a lot, and other times they get a whole bunch, depending on the site, depending on depending on the capacity of the developer at that time. Who knows if folks are out there that are ready to go right now, or say it's just bad timing. And so I encourage us, one, let's release this RFQ. My phone will ring. It's never going to work. You need to put $3 million in. It's got to be market rate. Town needs to own the property. I'm going to hear that, and I know I will. And I'm also going to be asked by folks, why do I have to wait for March 31st? Let's get going.
What can we do, Mark, to move the March 31st date up?
Nothing. I want to have March 31st date because I want to make sure that I dedicate the right amount of time into that RFQ. It's arguably 30-ish days away. If I can do it sooner, I will. You please know that from me. And that's why I wrote no later than.
Let's take one round of questions from the council before we go to the public. Tammy?
Thank you. So I jot down a lot of notes, so I have homework to do. But just staying consistent with some of my thoughts on housing. There are two plans. There's one with for that tract. There's one that has more of an office setting. There's, I think, the print is very small, so correct me if I'm wrong. And on the other, which is more of a single-family townhome type of place. I think we need to appreciate housing for various stages of life. Workforce and affordable, to me, workforce and affordable to me means roughly the same thing, and I'll explain why I say that. To say that the housing that we provide in the affordable range for that level of AMI isn't part of our workforce, in my mind, is somewhat insulting. And so our workforce incorporates our affordable. We just need to make sure that we look at it in the various stages of life, as far as I'm concerned. There are those who are young or single, and some of the housing that's been provided in the early part of this presentation is completely appropriate with dormitory and one-bedroom rental-type situations. And then there's housing that fits both the workforce/affordable definition that needs to be available so that people have their foot firmly planted on Hilton Head. In my mind, our community that is part of this project that we're working on are those that we want to bring in as true partners in town of Hilton Head, as residents, contributors, and the best way for that to happen is to give them that next foot in the door of their next residence. I'm a huge Habitat for Humanity advocate. I would love to see opportunities, more opportunities for people to establish a purchase and ownership in land and be prepared to get some equity out of their hard work in the long run. One of the things that concerns me is that, as we discussed, I don't think we'll ever satisfy what the consultant put in there, nor do I think we need to put that as our goal. We do have people who will want to live elsewhere and cross over the bridge, and we will also have people unless there's an opportunity to put their foot firmly here and gain some equity over time, not be able to afford that next step that happens on Hilton Head, and that's borne out by the statistics that you showed also earlier in the presentation with regard to average price homes, right? So something that you said, Mark, that resonated with me was that we're building a community, a neighborhood. And I would encourage that when we look at this, it's a new neighborhood that tries to address not just one singular part of the picture or the other, but tries to really give people opportunity and still stay within that neighborhood and on Hilton Head with their feet firmly planted as part of our residential contributing community.
Thank you. Bill?
First up, I'll take out the comment on public, which apparently was offensive. It wasn't intended to be.
Not to me.
I was relieved when I saw town responsibility. If you put that chart up there
Yes,
again,
sir.
please.
I'll be clear while I'm slowly clicking. I wasn't offended, but just make sure. Okay.
Good. But I think town responsibility, those responsibilities to me are avant-garde, they're creative, they're doing something that not everybody does. And yes, you are using town money to do that, directly or indirectly. But the view has to be not from an accounting standpoint in terms of the outflow of funds, but from the investment standpoint in terms of looking at the economics of this community and investing land, time, and talent to a very important need. I don't see, I see the town sharpening its pencil in terms of demanding, high quality, high performance. You have an awful lot of power setting the table. You may want to be looking at some clawback if we end up leasing for $1 a year. If the partner doesn't perform, right. You've got to think of some penalties, given human nature what it is. But I like what I see. In terms of the RFP, the firms that reply, if they don't know what they're doing, they're going to take a long time to reply. Brevity is important. It speaks to their brain power and availability to perform. So I wouldn't, I'd use your best judgment, but I wouldn't put that out for a long period of time. Other than that, I like the idea. Originally, I thought, when you talked about the timeline, we weren't going to do much of anything till you wrestled with a very important and onerous project, and that is determining the true legal capacity for everything that we own. That's a long production line before you get to market with everything you're going to sell. So I like the idea. You're really fast-tracking this by looking at the post office product. That's clean. It's clean in the sense of what we can do. It's not clean yet in terms of the state government, in terms of maybe ingress and egress. It's probably not clean in terms of the post office. I think we have to do something there. It's probably not clean in terms of exiting that area and getting on the road that would bring you to the school or to the rec center. But those are all things that we can work with. So I commend you for moving.
Thank you.
In this direction. Thank you.
Alex?
Yes, first of all, I want to just say that every unit counts, right? I mean, we can't argue back and forth if 2,000 is our number or not, but if it's 100, still every unit counts, right? I guess the last slide that you had up, just kind of laying out next steps and just some, I guess, bullets under the North End Post Office column. And I just want to speak to that just a bit. I'm going back to your fourth principle in one of your earlier slides. Incentives for housing should be applied in an equal manner so all property owners on the island can realize the economic value of their property. And here we're saying in the bottom next step, town-owned property and privately owned properties to advance housing options and opportunities. I think that's key, okay? I can appreciate, let's take a closer look at the North End Post Office, but I'd like for us to explore this more aggressively also. And here's why. The town property is not under any pressure. I mean, there's no for sale signs on it. You don't have to worry about somebody coming in, picking it up, converting it into a short-term rental. Okay, somebody picking it up, developing housing that is way over market price. The town's property does not have the same pressure that privately owned properties have. And unless we are aggressive in that area, we could not necessarily be fulfilling our goal long-term, all right? So that one, I think, needs a bit more meat on the bone. We've got property owners that want to do projects, and they may not be home run projects, but they're projects. And they could fit the affordable housing need here on Hilton Head if there was some assistance from the town in getting over the hump. That's it, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Oh. We've asked ourselves the question for as long as I've been on council, what is the highest and best use of $180 million worth of land assets that are non-income producing on the town's balance sheet? And we also recognize in asking that question that much of that land is restricted in its use because of the covenants that you mentioned earlier. But there are land holdings that are unrestricted. And we really haven't been able to answer that question, except to say that we do realize that there's a large part of the community that believes all of those land holdings should be clean and green forever, regardless of the restrictions or lack thereof. So to propose something like this today is watershed. No longer are we talking about developing the island or restricting and prohibiting the development of the island. We're talking about redeveloping the island. And we also recognize that the threat of our ability to attract a qualified workforce is the most significant threat that we have, ex a hurricane. This does it. This does it. I think we should proceed as recommended by Mark, but I think we also have to recognize that there's going to be pushback from a large part of the community in that they think these land holdings should not be developed. And we've got to be prepared to effectively answer that objection. And I think you have in your presentation. But I do recognize that there will be people squarely opposed to any development of the town land holdings. So, people be prepared for that. It's coming, it's there, and this will rekindle that discussion. We don't know what the absorption will be. We don't really know what the demand for rentals, long-term rentals on the island is. We've had one example in Shelter Cove, and they're certainly not affordable, but Water Walk apartments, I understand, are now fully leased up. That took longer than Southeast Development originally thought. Why did it take longer? Who's in there? Are they island residents or are they new to the island? Are they old? Are they young? Are there kids or not? We missed a glorious opportunity to develop data points on the lease-up of Water Walk. We have now on Gardner Road, the old Christian Academy site, where we've got 250 market rate units being completed, and they're going to lease up. I suggest that we find some way to understand who the renters are, who's going in. Again, are they simply people relocating from the island, or are they new to the island? What type of person wants to rent long-term on Hilton Head Island? That'll help us understand what we're suggesting that we go into here. And certainly, if we build this project, or should I say when we build this project, we've got to understand who wants to live there. And if this is to be a success, we got to understand our market more fully, so when we build the second one, we can do it more effectively.
Thank you, sir.
Lynn?
Thank you. I want to thank and salute the town manager and the staff. This is the best public meeting, the best workshop I have ever participated in on this island. This is outstanding, and I salute you and say sincere appreciation to each and every one of you for all of your hard work in coming up with some wonderful ideas. We've talked some here about definitions. If I go back to our workforce housing consultant, just don't get hung up in that, just call it workforce. And that's what I do moving forward, and I think that's the definition that's in our ordinance. Then we talk about what does workforce mean. As I recall, in our ordinance, workforce means 60 to 80% AMI. We need to take a look at that. If we're going to be varying that, we can, but we need to vary that by changing that ordinance. This program today began off general, broad market strokes. And I was worried that I was going to come out of here without a specific goal in mind, but I was wrong. And I thank you for that, because you have gone from the general identifying the problem down to a specific, a very strong specific, which makes a whole lot of sense to me. And I'm glad that we do have a bookend on time. I appreciate the mayor saying he wanted shorter time, but I understand there's a heck of a lot of work that needs to go into this. And between now and March 31 is not a very long time, in my view. So I'm very, very pleased about that. Then I want to throw a little bit of a monkey wrench. David Bennett, our prior mayor, was in the business of building workforce housing. I spent hours with him one day trying to understand how his business worked and how the industry worked. And the answer was 9% income tax credits in the federal law. We were told that the state definition that allowed those funds to come here was so restrictive that it wouldn't meet any piece of property here on Hilton Head Island. Since then, there have been revisions in that which were identified to make it more liberal, and so apparently that could work here. I don't want to do anything in conjunction with 9% tax credits to slow down or impede anything we're talking about in terms of building public-private partnerships and specifically doing a project on the North End Post Office site. So I'm excited about the opportunities here, and I'm committed to work on it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Curtis, do you have any,
Pardon me?
have any comments, sir?
No, this is, no, this is 100% a policy discussion at this point.
At this point. Okay, we'll take comments from the citizens now. Everybody has 3 minutes. There were no derogatory or any marks against the council, and we'll start on this corner here and work our way around. Right? Yes. You're first.
Good morning. My name is Mary Eminetti. I've been a full-term resident on Hilton Head since 2000 and also a realtor, and I've seen it all. I have been sitting in town council from Mayor Peoples on, and this same conversation has been heard all those years. I have attended many housing development meetings with Charleston, Greenville, Colorado, Florida, and they've all been here. And it seems as though, I'm growing older. I'm becoming a blonde, one strand at a time. And that was all brunette when I started here. So I don't know if I'll live to see this, but through the grace of God, I hope so. I would first like to ask the town manager if I could have a complete copy of the presentation on paper, so I won't have to go on the internet, because I want to answer and make my comments to each one of the items that you spoke about today. And I want to clear one thing that was said with regards to the Habitat community. If I'm not mistaken, that land was not donated by the town. There was like a trade in there somewhere.
Okay.
Okay? So, but that information is repeated constantly, and I think that after today, it should never, ever be said in this room by anyone in council that it was donated, because it was not. I was on the Habitat Board for 6 years, so I know a lot about that. And I think there should be a real serious housing development committee that would compose of a couple of citizens, realtors. We know all about the rental and the ownership. If you want to know about the rentals, and we can give you all that information, Waterwork, or either the new project on Gardner's. A couple of the town council people, and we need legal representation, because there's always this, can we do this legally? So maybe if the town lawyer sits in on that. That's all I want to say today, because I want to put everything in writing. One last statement. When we talk about workforce coming to this community, we need to always include transportation. Park and ride to the island. And as a realtor, I can tell you, the millions of people that are coming here ask about, can we get a bus or anything to go off the island to shopping? So we definitely need to talk about transportation when we talk about housing. Thank you.
Very much. Anybody else in the first row? Yes, sir.
Good morning. My name is Ken Campbell. I'm a resident on the island and have been for many years. When we first came into the meeting, you were talking about, you had a representative from the school district and talking about impact fees. I will just make my opinion known. I've been in the housing industry for 50 years. Impact fees can be positive. They can be very negative. Take a look out in on the West Coast in particular. Housing's a real problem. Affordability is a real problem. And the one thing they constantly bring up is we have really high impact fees. Impact fees, in my opinion, are more negative than positive. School district has an obligation. It's an obligation to educate our children, our grandchildren. They have an obligation to go to the public for funding. What they are proposing is a backhanded way of raising that. They're talking about $8 million. They talked about $650 million being needed, and they funded $360. I would be very, very careful about this island that already contributes greatly to the school district of putting another vehicle in place to support the schools. We believe in education. We believe in supporting schools in every way we can. We don't think that's the way to do it. So thank you there.
Thank you.
With regard to the workforce housing, we're strong believers in workforce housing. There's no question, and I don't remember who it was that brought it up, might have been you, Mr. Lennox, about there'll be a lot of opposition. Some of it will be on the basis of just green space. Most of it, I suspect, is NIMBYism, and there's going to be a great amount of that. So the one thing I would request is that you not move forward with other projects that restrict where affordable housing, or I'm sorry, where workforce housing can go. I know we have 100 acres, that there are plans in process for park there. I think that's great. I think open space and parks are good. That's also an opportunity for workforce housing, and there may be restrictions. And one of the things I guess I would ask our town manager, you presented a lot of obstacles, and we know there are obstacles, covenant restrictions and so on. Typically, when we present obstacles, great to present solutions. What I heard you read from one of the legal documents, it was pretty broad-based. There were a couple of phrases in there that seemed to leave open the opportunity for interpretation. So I would, before I would eliminate any particular piece of property, I would look at what are the opportunities to remove those restrictions. Thank you.
Anybody else in the first row? Good, second row? Woman on the end?
Good morning. My name is Sandy Gillis. I'm a 36-year resident of our town, and I'm also the current director at the Deep Well Project. And I am so excited that I came to this meeting today. For many, many years, we need stakes in the ground. We really need a stake in the ground. And I share that just because our friends at the Deep Well Project see the problems with not having stake in the ground every day. We see people who are renewing their leases, and the leases are going from $900 or $1,000 a month to $1,400 a month. Wages and raises cannot keep up with that kind of an increase. We see situations where we have 12 and 14 people living in two-bedroom apartments. We have people 10 and 12 people living in single wide mobile homes. This is not the way it needs to be, and I am so, so excited to be here today to see, I can almost see the stakes in the ground now, and I'm very excited about that, and I appreciate the work that goes in. I know if it was easy, we could have waved a magic wand, and we could have had this done years ago. I know it is hard work, and I know there's so many factors to be considered. I just want to make sure that you understand what you are doing is so critical and so important to so many of your neighbors. And we work with them at Deepwell every day, every week, and some of the stories truly are heartbreaking, and they are not the American dream. And I am very excited to know that this council may be the council that doesn't kick the can down the road and is going to do something about it. And I thank you for your courage, and I thank you for sticking with it. And I speak for those folks who could not be here today, but they're working. They're working here, and they want to be here, and they want to work here. And thank you for making it possible for them to live here and enjoy the same amenities that all of us do. Thank you.
Thank you. Jack?
Good morning, Mr. Mayor and members of council. I'm Jack Alderman. I live at 67 Dolphin Head Drive. I'm here as an advocate for housing that's available and attainable and affordable and sustainable. There is not an issue that is really more important to Hilton Head Island's economy at this point than this one. You know that. There is not an issue that is more important to Hilton Head's quality of life for all of us, working families and tourists and retirees like me and most of you behind the gates. There's not an issue that's more important to Hilton Head's future vitality than housing. There's not an issue that is more important to Hilton Head's sense of community than housing. And it's an issue that's been coming at us like a freight train for decades. So I'm grateful that this council is talking about it, and this town manager and the planners are working hard on it. It needs to move along at a very strong pace at this point, and the community needs to understand why it is moving ahead. And I'm glad to see what is in Mr. Orlando's recommended steps for today. Hope those can move along very quickly. I'm here today to ask 4 things of town council. Please quit giving attainable housing service. Citizens, and at times council, only talk. Instead, put the power of town government behind it to make it real. Affordable housing is a great thing to talk about, a great thing to plan, but it doesn't mean a thing until the first 100 nurses and teachers and healthcare workers and first responders move in. Second, give your town manager and staff the support and resources they need to help make it happen. Third, move this ahead with creativity and urgency. The clock is ticking, and the island is already experiencing, as you know, the negative impacts of a workforce that lives mostly off the island. And fourth, quickly identify the suitable sites for attainable housing and get to work on those with due diligence right away. To me, it is no longer acceptable for members of the community to say, we love attainable, affordable housing in sustainable neighborhoods, but then to say site A doesn't work, and site B doesn't work, and site C doesn't work, and site D doesn't work. We need to make some of those sites work. Perhaps you could be looking for legal opinions and plans that address how to make these sites work, as opposed to legal opinions that focus on why they might not work. In my mind, Site A is a small portion of the Mid-Island Tract, and that's one of the tracts that I think deserves that kind of attention at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. John?
Good morning, Mr. Mayor. My name's John O'Toole. I'm a Hilton Head resident and executive director of the Beaufort County Economic Development Corporation. Tom Lennox, Councilman Lennox, has seen me at regional groups say that I'm really frustrated, that a lot's done for birds and turtles, and we've got to care about people too. I just want to say really quickly that employees are the gasoline that fills the engine of the economy. And so what you're doing today, I'm so excited for the good work that staff's doing and your courage to move forward. And I don't think it takes a lot of courage, because I tried to meet somebody Saturday at a particular spot. It was closed because they were understaffed. I think most people who live on this island know that this is a crisis. The platform's burning, and we have to do something. And the last point I'll leave you with is that if that doesn't concern you, we know in our hearts we have to care about people. And whatsoever you do to somebody who can't find housing, you do to somebody much better. And I think you're on the right track, and I'm really excited to be here today. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm Risa Prince, and I'm here today on behalf of the Greater Island Council Government Policy Committee. There's an old adage that goes, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always gotten. It's pretty clear that we have not progressed since the consultant study. We continue to have a problem with the availability of workers. And according to the business owners I know, it's only worsened over the last 3 to 4 years, even in spite of increased wages. And certainly, if we're not at the tipping point right now, we're in the tipping zone, where if we don't do something significant to disrupt this trend, we're going to have a problem with our economy that will not be overridden. I came here today to advocate for a council commitment to a significant proof of concept project. We don't know if this solution that's been proposed is really going to answer all the questions, but it certainly will give us data that will allow us to move forward and give us some direction for how to do that. You all have a fiduciary and an ethical responsibility to better the community. That's what you signed up for when you ran for office, and that's what we elected you to do. And please note that if we were to build 2,000 units at your authorized density, that would only take 15% of the town land, and less if we partner with people who own land who want it in this program. So there's no real threat to our green space and those public spaces that we all have come to desire. So I challenge you to move quickly on this. Drinks are on me if we're at a 2023 groundbreaking. And I want to thank Mr. Orlando and the members of council who have the courage to go ahead and make this decision to move today. So thank you for the time.
Thank you.
Mark, make sure that drinks are on me as part of the minutes.
I saw 4 people write that down.
Good morning. My name is John Campbell. I'm a 7th-generation native, and I am part of the Planning Commission also. I definitely agree with Mr. Brown here that we need to focus and look at privately owned land. I mean, that is something that's disappearing fast. We could definitely help the problem out by looking at privately owned property and assisting those people with a grant that will help pay for water, sewer, infrastructure fees. That will also help them bring in second income and help them pay for their taxes with that money. And Mark Lane, you did an excellent job today, too.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Good morning. My name is Lee Lucier. I'm with the Richardson Group. Also have a couple restaurants on the island. And I want to say today's outcome wasn't what I expected. I'm encouraged. It's bold, it's brave, and it's finally a real step at addressing an issue that's been in front of everyone, but it's been ignored because I think of some of the complications that Mr. Lennox brought up. Everyone has to realize on this island, it's impactful not from our work staffs, not from your quality of life, not from your education, from your first responders. Recently, I was in the hospital on Hilton Head. I live here, I choose to be treated here. I sat in an emergency room for 23 hours. And then I was asked if I wanted to leave my community to go to coastal Carolina to be seen. I said, sure, why? Well, they have staff and they have a bed. It's great. I went to coastal Carolina, got my care, came home. Then I got a $4,700 ambulance bill that's not covered by insurance because the hospital here where I choose to have my family, number of businesses, about 170 employees, because I couldn't be seen. So Tom, I asked that when people ask you why this has to happen, it's a pretty simple story. There's a couple of things that are also brought up. It was brought up the initial consultant's report that we need 2,000 bedrooms, 2,000 units. I would love to see what that number is now. It's nowhere near 2,000. My estimation is probably 4,000 at this point. The economy has increased, and I think Mark had shown a slide at 39% value increase in property. Well, if you bought a unit in 1970 for $100,000 and it's now worth $600,000, I'm not renting it anymore, I'm selling it. So there's no way that 2,000 number is even close. The density project has not worked. The density project won't work. 10% increased density would take 17,000 acres of density on this island to get to that number of 2,000. So I'm encouraged by today. I think today's project is a bold step. I don't think it's big enough. I don't think it's close to big enough, but it's a bold step. The only question I have is what criteria we put on there to assure that the 80% of the AMI of the $50,000 employee is met at $1,250 a month. That is a key component. The private-public should work, but again, in running the numbers and underwriting, it will not work until the financing is done by the town or town's financing of bonds or raising money. So again, thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else in the third row back there, Lance? Anybody else? Is there anybody else I missed in the audience? Well, good. I thank you all very much for coming. Mark, I thank you and your staff for all your work you've done. Council, I appreciate all your input today and along the way. And I call this meeting adjourned. Thank you.